The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. So thrilled to be here with you on this week of many celebrations. Of course, we'll have Thanksgiving on Thursday and Hanukkah starts tomorrow night. Very excited about that. And so much that's been going on here on the show having to do with the Festival of Toys, and you guys have written in over the weekend. We got a lot of questions that we're going to get to, a lot of different things that we're going to talk about. Before we get to any of that, though, I want to remind you that the Holiday Giveaway Extravaganza continues. Even though the Festival of Toys is officially over, the giveaways will keep on coming every hour between now and our last show on December 20th. That'll be the last show of the year. Every hour, we are going to be giving something away. So this is how you win. You watch the show, and you'll hear at the top of the hour what the item is that we're giving away for the hour. Sometimes it's multiple items. During that hour, at some point, Emily will put on the screen a word or phrase. I don't even know what it is or when it will appear. And whatever that word or phrase is, you want to write that down, send us an email. Emily's going to put the email address that you send it to on the screen. You will send us that email, and in the subject line you will put the title of the item that you want to win, and in the body of the email you will list whatever the phrase or the word was that was shown on the screen. So this hour, there's the email that you want to send it to. This hour we're going to give away 2 separate board games from Endless Games. We had Brian Turtle from Endless Games on the show last week, and these were some of the games that we talked about with him. Alex Plank was here as well. This remarkable game, Korner'd, bears the logo. It's been approved by, it's on here somewhere. There it is, Autism Speaks. And it's been found to be really reinforcing for a lot of our kids on the spectrum, a great way for them to work on a variety of different skills. It is, nobody has to be verbal. Great game. It doesn't even involve, if you don't want it to, taking turns. But what it does do is teach visual acuity and patterning. It's a board much like on the cover here that has all these different colors, and they have puzzle pieces that can only fit in one place on the board to match the colors. It's fascinating to play. I played this with my husband and my son, and my son on the spectrum was so unbelievably awesome at it, and my husband had the worst, hardest time. I was sort of in the middle. I could do it, but it took me a couple of minutes, but my son was awesome. Great self-esteem builder, really reinforcing for our kids on the autism spectrum. So it's called Korner'd, and it is one of the board games that we're going to be giving away in this hour. The other one is Name 5. This is an incredible game that goes hand in hand with some of the lessons that we do in therapy, that at a certain point when a child has learned labels, then we start to move into categories and features of things, and we ask them, once they understand categories and the labels within the categories, to name 5. Like you'll teach a child, what the label for a lion is and what the label for a tiger and a zebra are, and eventually you'll say to them, name 5 animals, and they'll list 5 animals. Well, this game goes right along with that. It already has topics for you, and some of them are harder than others, right? So this is a great game for older kids too. And sometimes it gets really specific. On the back here, I'm seeing, with a small child, you might ask them to list list 5 foods, right? Well, then on the game, you can up it a little bit to name 5 purple foods. Oh, and then you have to really think. And you can play this in teams so that the children can, because 5 might be hard. 5 purple foods for me would be hard, right? So you play in teams so that you can feed off of each other's energy and build that self-esteem. But great, great game for kids on the autism spectrum. And this game has a level that takes it up a notch, so you can play it with much older kids too. Fun party game too. You don't have to be on the spectrum to enjoy these games. Really, really fun. So these are both from Endless Games, and you can win them in this hour. I will tease you with the fact that next hour we are going to be giving away this fabulous Uncle Milton toy. A lot of you, after you saw this, wrote it in and said, what's the name of that toy? This comes from Uncle Milton, one of my favorite companies, Marvel Science, and this is, the actual name of it is the Repulsor Ray Force. It's the Iron Man Repulsor Ray Tech Lab. So it's the one where you have the little fan that goes and you have to keep the ball afloat, and you can go through a maze with it. Very cool. Hand-eye coordination, very reinforcing, has a science element to it. A lot of our kids out there who are really into Marvel and really into science are going to love this. I know a little boy in my house who will want this. So if you want to win this, that's in the next hour. Those are the giveaways for today. So having said all of that, we want to remind you that this whole show is meant to be interactive. We will be with you live for the next 2 hours talking about autism from a 360-degree perspective. All the different things that come into play having to do with autism. Of course, it's a holiday time, so we talk about that and ever so much more. But we hope that you will participate by writing into us, calling in, however you want to interact. Emily's going to show you some different ways. I'm going to remind you that one of my favorite ways to interact with you is if you visit www.autism-live.com. When you go there, there's a computer screen. Hit the little play button, and you can be watching the live show or the most recently recorded live show, or choose from an array of recently recorded live shows. On the other side of the screen, though, is a thin, long white box. That is our live feature. Put your cursor there, start typing, hit enter, and it shows up magically here on my screen. You don't have to log in. It's completely anonymous. We have no idea who you are. So if you write in and there's something you want us to get back to you about, make sure that you leave us a way to contact you. We can edit that out before we show it to the audience at home. Remember that that feature is live and free. And it is now live 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So even if the show isn't live, you can write in. Just remember to be really specific about what you're seeing. Sometimes over the weekend, you guys will write in and say, I wish I knew more about what she's talking about, but I don't know which she. So let me know who the guest is or what they're talking about that you want to have more information about. All right. I also remind you at the top of the show that I am not an expert in autism. I'm a mom. My son was diagnosed with autism at 2.5 actually. He was able to start intensive ABA therapy from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders when he was 3. So I frequently talk about how much I love the Center for Autism and Related Disorders because they gave me back my child. But I want you to know, and if you have the ability to have services from Korner'd, I encourage you, I can speak with all authority of how amazing that is to have in your life. But I also want you to know that there are many, many ABA providers, and that getting good quality ABA should be on all of our wish lists for this holiday for our kids, because we know that it's the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism for all of our kids. And it is effective, but it takes a lot to be able to do an ABA program, right? You got to have a lot in place, and you got to learn the ins and outs of it yourself. So we talk about all of that and ever so much more, things that will go with the ABA, ways that you can afford funding, ways that you put food on the table, ways that you get your child healthy, and ways that you deal with the stress that will come with all of this. So whether you're a parent, teacher, practitioner, working with a child on the spectrum, or you yourself are on the spectrum, we know that you all want one thing: progress. Progress, and we know it's possible. We absolutely know it's possible for everyone to see progress. It's going to be at different rates and with different arrival points, right? But progress is there, and it's essential that we find a way for you to get as much progress as you can. So we want to help you in any way that we can. Write in, tell us what you need, and we'll see what we can't do to help you out. Now, we like to start every morning with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to make sense of it within our everyday lives, right? So we start out with the actual definition, and then we give you a working definition, which sometimes makes the BCBAs break out into hives. But we need a way to access this information, right? So our phrase today, one of my favorites, joint attention. And this is not saying, oh, my elbows hurt, right? So let's take a look at what our actual definition is. Joint attention is the process by which one alerts another to a stimulus via nonverbal means such as gazing or pointing. Okay. And this is one of the reasons why we do the jargon, because if you're a parent and you've got a child who isn't speaking and somebody says, well, we need to start working on joint attention first, and you don't want to appear like an idiot, so you don't ask them in the meeting, or you don't want to take the time because you're paying somebody by the minute. So you go to look this up and you see this and say, okay, I understand what the words in this thing mean, but I don't really get what it has to do with this is why we do this. So our working definition, and it says social rules here, but it's still joint attention. It's the ability to share attention with another person toward an object, person, or event. And I talk about this triangle of attention a lot on the show. I recently was on a tram in Disneyland, and I watched a little boy who was so cute, tiny, tiny little boy. And I eventually, when we got off the tram, I asked his parents how old he was. I think he was 18 months old. But I watched this fabulous joint attention that he looked over. It was around Halloween time. And on the tram, they have little statues as you go by, and it's all these Disney Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse and all these Halloween poses. And the tram's going, and the dad was holding him up so that he could see, and he looked over and saw Mickey, and he was so excited about it, and he pointed and he pointed, and he looked back at his dad, and he pointed and then watched as his dad looked over and saw Mickey, and then he grinned, and then he looked back at his dad, and his dad looked at him, and they had this lovely, lovely moment, and then they both looked back at Mickey, and then they both looked at each other, and the dad kind of squeezed him, and it was like this happy, fluffy, beautiful moment. And I really wanted to stop the train. I wanted to stop the train and run forward and say, do you have any idea how miraculous what just happened is? And do you know that that doesn't happen with all kids? And that when it doesn't happen with all kids, stuff starts to unravel. And their ability to socialize with other people can be affected for a long time if we don't fix it. Because it was just so organic and natural, and the dad was just having this warm, fuzzy moment. And I think, he was feeling great, but I don't know that he knew how miraculous that this child knew how to do this. And because you and I know, I have a son who didn't do that. He just didn't do that. And I knew that something was missing, but didn't quite know what. And we had to go back and pick that moment up. We had to teach my son how to look at something and want to share it with somebody else and have that moment of interaction and look back at it again and look at each other and kind of learn about your reaction to it based off of somebody else's. Because let's face it, some things are happy and wonderful that the child looks at, but other things aren't happy and wonderful. So the child who sees the dog that's approaching and looks at the dog and says dog, and turns and looks at mom, and mom has this frightened, oh no, and the child looks at that and realizes, oh, that's something to be feared. Oh, the dog's fangs are out, and starts to make those connections. joint attention is so essential to, it's a building block into social communication that progresses and progresses and progresses. But if a child isn't doing this basic triangle of attention of, oh, look at the giraffe. Did you see the giraffe? We're looking at the giraffe together. It's a beautiful giraffe. It's like a missed thread in a sweater that's being put together, and that missed thread becomes a bigger hole and a bigger hole and a bigger hole that can affect how that child progresses. Now, here's the good news. We can go back at any point and work on making it reinforce. We can first teach the skill of joint attention and then reinforce it and reinforce it and reinforce it so that it becomes this really pleasant thing for a child to share something with a human being. And that's joint attention. And it will lead to much bigger, more important skills than just look at the Mickey Mouse or look at the giraffe. Cool thing. A thread that you don't want to have missing from the sweater of communication that you're having with any individual. So that is joint attention. Isn't that cool? All right. We always in the morning have a question that we ask you guys. We love interacting with you on Facebook. We encourage you to go to our Facebook page. Give us a like while you're there. Sign up for our free newsletter that comes out on the first day of the month, and the December one is coming, so you won't want to miss that. It's free, and we don't inundate you with lots of stuff, and give us a like when you're on Facebook, and check out what other people write to the question of the day. I love it. I learn so much from the things you guys write in. So a lot of us are going to be sitting down to a big meal on Thursday here in the United States, and we want to know, what is the hardest thing about meal times for you or your child? What's rough about this? Because we don't want to leave out of the equation that it's hard for adults too. You know, one of the great things that has come about in my life from being an autism parent is that my perspective taking is growing. As we've been teaching my son perspective taking, I'm learning to take more and more perspective of other people and realizing that at the Thanksgiving table, everybody has something going on. I have something going on. My child has something going on. My husband has something going on. Aunt Martha has something going on, right? And a lot of times people, you know, if you come to the table and you're hungry or you're not hungry or you don't like what's being put in front of you, there are issues that are there. So we want to know, what's the hardest thing at a mealtime for you? Or what's the hardest thing for your child? Because maybe that's something that we can start to address about what would be the process of making it easier. Because couldn't we all use it to be a little bit easier? Mealtimes are supposed, we know that Norman Rockwell picture about we're all going to sit here by this big, huge turkey and everybody's going to be happy and food is love and everyone should be happy and joyous, except it's not a lot of the time. But it would be nice to get as close to that as we possibly can so that people get to the table and are able to enjoy the people. Right? And not just the food, but the food as well. Okay, so write in on that. We'll be looking at that a little bit later on in the program. We always have a topic of the week, and this is a very short week for us because it's just today and tomorrow, but of course we had to go here. The topic this week is giving thanks. What can we be grateful for? And you know, it's important that we're grateful as often as we possibly can. Not for any other reason that it puts your head in a mindset where you look around and go, what do I have to be grateful for, right? I think we've all been there on a given day where we've said it's all circling the toilet. You know, we've heard the flush in the background and whatever's going on, it's circling the toilet. And it's easy to say everything is horrible right now. But we know that there's always something. There's a light somewhere. There's something to be thankful for, even if it is just the fact that we can breathe, that we're still here, whether it's for 5 more minutes, 5 more days, or 50 more years, that we're still here in this moment, which gives us another chance, right? So we're going to be talking with you guys today and tomorrow about what we can give thanks for. And I think it's a really important topic always, but especially this week. Why not take the excuse to figure out what we can be thankful for? I was sharing with somebody the other day about how at a lot of motivational conferences, they'll do this exercise where they'll say to everybody in a huge room of people, hey, let's all look around the room and let's see as many blue things as we can. So you've got 30 seconds, look around the room, see all the blue things that you can see. And of course you look around and you go, oh yeah, there's a lot of blue stuff here. I'm memorizing it. This is the towel. Look at all that blue stuff. Great. Then they ask you to close your eyes and think about all the blue stuff in the room that you're in. And then they say, all right, now list 8 things in the room. We're back to our name 5. Name 5 things in the room that are brown. And you go, brown? I was looking for blue. And your mind searches for, and maybe you can come up with 1 or 2 things that are brown, but it seems like it's not a room full of brown stuff, right? Because you were thinking about the blue. And of course you open your eyes and you see vast amounts of brown everywhere. It's crazy the amount of brown that's in the room, but you weren't looking for it. And I think whenever we look for what to be thankful for, we're likely to see ever so much more that we can be grateful for. And if you have a choice today of being mad and ticked off and depressed, or be in a place where you go, look at the riches that I personally have. The day goes better if you choose to look for the riches that are there. Even when there's plenty of blue or plenty of brown, right? It's what do we want to look for? So just for a day, experiment with. Look for what can you be thankful about, and write it and tell us if there's someone or something that you're particularly grateful for. And we're going to be talking about that with all of our guests, and I'll be talking about that too, because I don't know about you, I have so much to be thankful for. See, I'm going to get all verklempt. In any case, big show today. I'll be honest with you, the show is a little bit malleable today, and I'll tell you why. Because a lot of our guests that are involved with today, I was with until very late last night for a very important reason. It was not a party, but it was an event for Autism Speaks, where we were sitting on a board looking at and reviewing grants to give away money, right? What could be more important than that? But it was a very late night, so I'm a little bit concerned about who and how we will have here. But on our schedule, we are scheduled to have Alex Plank from wrongplanet.net. Alex designed and was the creative genius behind wrongplanet.net. If you haven't gone there, you need to go there. It is the single largest resource for young people and adults on the autism spectrum and their parents to be able to talk with each other, get information, and learn more about themselves and how to be as successful as they want to be in this world that seems to be slightly different, right? Then we also have scheduled Matt Asner from Autism Speaks to be here with us in the second hour. Wonderful autism dad. And we talked about this last night, that we really want to talk about the process that happened last night of the grant review. It was very fascinating. And I know a lot of you want to know about how does Autism Speaks grant money. This is the first time that I was ever there to see the process, and it was very exciting. And so fingers crossed, Matt will be able to be with us this morning to talk about that. And then, of course, there's a lot in the news that we have to get to. So that and ever so much more. And of course, we're going to talk about food. We're just going to talk about food a lot, because I don't know about you, my head is partially in the kitchen prepping things. So we want to know the kinds of things that you guys are eating and the kinds of recipes that you're looking for. I'm wanting to try a new pumpkin pie recipe that's GFCF. So I want to know if any of you have that. And somebody wrote that what they're grateful for is their family. I think that's a way to start at the top, right? Absolutely. I am so grateful for my family, but we're not going to go there. I'm going to get all weepy. But keep them coming in and post them on Facebook. Don't forget to participate in the Holiday Giveaway Extravaganza. We're going to take a break, and we're going to come back with all of the things that we said we would talk about and ever so much more, including some questions that you guys have written in over the weekend and ones that you write in now. So stick with us. Hi, we're at the Toys R Us in Porter Ranch, California. And Emily and I are going to take a little tour around the store and find some great toys for some great kids.
All right, let's go.
Come with us.
Yes.
Okay. Bring your dinosaur and come on, let's go look at things in the game aisle.
Okay.
I know you love games.
I do love.
All right. So here we are in the game aisle, Emily, and I want to show you that there's all these games that you can get for kids of all ages. They're interactive and really remarkable. One of the hot toys this year and many other years is the Bop It toy.
Okay, so what about the Bop It is so reinforcing?
Well, you know what? It can be interactive. It can be a social game. It makes lots of noises. Sometimes they light up depending on the version. It helps to work on fine motor skills, and it helps to work on fluency. This toy will grow with a child, and in fact, you can get it in different versions. This is a little bit more complex version, and up top here we have one that's especially for older kids. It's called the Smash the Light. I would wait until a child is older to play with this one. So should we check out the Lego aisle?
Yes.
Okay, let's do it.
Go. So how can we use Legos to help our kids?
Well, they're really spectacular toys for our kids because they work on executive functions and planning. They're really colorful. You can work on colors and grouping and matching, counting, because they have the little dots on the top. And if you have a younger child, you can start with the Duplo toys that are compatible with Lego and they don't have the choking hazard.
So then as the kids get older, what's great about Legos, it looks like, is that there's all sorts of themes. We've got movies here and video games, so the kids can really connect with what's personal to them. So Legos are amazing, but what else do we have to see?
Let's look at some educational toys in the leapfrog aisle, shall we? Okay.
Okay, so what do you have here?
Well, we're in the leapfrog aisle. This particular toy, very popular this year, is a leap reader. It comes with a little pen, and it tells us that we're going to read, write, and listen, all skills that we want to work on with a child. This pen that's in this box, you can put it over different pages in the book. It will read aloud to the child. They can trace their letters. It reinforces them for doing a great job. It's a really spectacular toy for our younger kids that are working on reading, writing, and listening.
This looks like a lot of fun and a really great way to help our kids learn to read and write.
Absolutely.
What else are we going to play with today?
I think we should take a trip down the functional pretend play aisle. This is where you're going to find all the things that are like real, but the toy version. So I've got this lovely set here that's all fresh vegetables, so I'm teaching nutrition at the same time. They're all appropriately colored, but I've got a knife so I can be cutting them too. This is really great play for a young child.
Shannon, I heard you got some toys that I get to play with now.
Yes, I'm going to take you to the demo table. We're going to let Emily play with some toys, and we're going to be giving some of these toys away on the show. But they're not just any toys. These are toys that are featured in this year's Toys R Us toy guide for differently abled children. And this is put together with the help of our friends at Lecotech.
So what do all these different icons mean?
These are different icons that tell us what skill this toy might help to develop in our children.
So can I play with the toys now?
Yes, it's time to play with the toys, Emily.
So I think I recognize this guy.
Yes, this is the ever popular and very sweet Elmo. But this is a very specific Elmo that teaches adaptive skills like zippering.
Almost yellow triangle zipper.
And so we get the reinforcement of Elmo talking to us when we do these things. There's a let's keep playing. So it encourages the child to continue to interact. And he's very reinforcing. When he giggles, I just want to hug him and play with him some more. Okay, so moving on, let's look at some Melissa and Doug toys. These are incredible toys. They'll last several different generations because they're made out of good quality wood.
Awesome.
And let's start with a lace and trace toy. Now, I happen to know that you love turtles,
I
Emily.
do love turtles.
And this is a set of farm animals lace and trace. And the child can pick out a color that they like for a lace.
All right.
And there are lots of different things that they can do with this. And I know it might seem like this is an old-fashioned toy, but you know, sometimes the old-fashioned toys are the best toys. Because what you're doing right now, Emily, is that you're using a lot of hand-eye coordination and you're using the pincer grasp. This is a precursor to writing right here. If you've got a child who's having difficulty holding a pencil, this is a really reinforcing way to work on this. And it comes in lots of different things. And then also for Melissa and Doug, we have this amazing switch and spin. Love this so much. This is a great cause and effect toy. As we start to put the gears together, we notice that when you turn one, another one can turn. You can rearrange this and do it in lots of different ways. There are 10 design boards, so you don't have to just do fish. There are other things that you can put there instead.
That's awesome.
Kids love this toy, and it's another Melissa and Doug toy.
Cool.
All right, let's take a look at some fun games.
So I found this game, and it's called Fibber. So Shannon, I'm going to need you to put on your fibbing glasses.
I want a fib.
All right. So this game is totally reinforcing, and it helps our kids to work on lying.
Yes, and that's something we really, I know it sounds strange, but we want to work on that because being able to tell a lie is something that helps with safety issues. And also being able to tell if somebody else is lying is a really useful life skill.
What you need to do is get rid of your cards without trying to grow your nose, kind of like Pinocchio.
Okay.
But if you get caught...
And so eventually you can have a whole string of noses attached to the end of your nose. Very colorful. Again, we can be working on the colors. Kind of hilarious. A kid's going to want to play this with mom or dad and see that mom is Pinocchio telling lots of lies. I like this game a lot.
This is a great game.
We've had a really great time at Toys R Us, and all of the toys that you see here on the table we're going to be giving away on the show. So stay tuned to find out how you can win one of these great toys.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm looking at one of the questions that you guys wrote in over the weekend. Someone wrote in and said, do you have any recommendations for toys/activities, for independent play while I get my work done? I have 2 typically developing children, 6 and 2, and my special child is 4.5. Okay, so you got 3 kids out the gate, and that's a handful, and heaven knows you've got stuff that you have to get done. So my first question is, because we can get toys, right? And the toys are essential and absolutely wonderful, but we have to teach independent play before we can have the expectation that a toy is going to get it done. So my assumption, and I hate to assume anything, is that you want to start to work on independent play. So even before recommending a toy, I would suggest that for all of them, it's going to be much easier for the 6-year-old, and then for the 4.5 who's got special needs, it's going to be a little bit tougher. And for a 2-year-old, you know, independent play for a 2-year-old is rough because they still have to be supervised at that point, especially if they're sticking things in their mouth that you still have to have eyes on. So, you know, that's my little asterisk here. And I'm wondering in terms of what kind of work, that if it's a thing where you need to be able to get food on the stove and be cooking things on the stove, and it's, you know, a half-hour, 45-minute proposition versus if you're working from home. Right? And then you got to get in like a 4-hour shift or something like that, because then we're talking about something completely different. But let's backtrack for the benefit of everybody, and let's just talk about how we teach independent play. Because like every other skill that we teach, we want to break it down into small increments, and we need to make it reinforcing. And one of the things that we can do to teach kids independent play is to give them a schedule. And, you know, there's tons of different ways to do this, and it depends on your individual child and what their skill levels are, but especially because you have your own small little baseball team of 3, right? There are ways that if they play well together that you can make it fun for all 3 of them. That, you know, one of the things I've seen videotapes of, and that we did something similar to this with my child by himself, but I think it's actually more fun when you've got more kids, is to, while they're still asleep or the night before after they've gone to sleep, set up in whatever room that you want them to be in, you set up little play stations with different sets of toys. It's activities. Think about, you know, when kids are in kindergarten and they have center time, right? Where you're going to start at this table and you're going to do a craft project, and then you're going to transition and you're going to go to this center where we're going to work on language skills, and then you're going to transition, you're going to go to this place where somebody's going to read to you, right? So it's that kind of a thing, but you set up these stations in your home. So it's literally physically they have to go from this area where the Barbie dream house is set up to here where the easel is set up, and they have to, you know, draw a picture on the easel, and you know, it's like a semicircle, however much room you have, but they literally have to move from this activity to this activity. And when you start out, you're going to do it with them. And I know you go, but the whole point is that I want them to play independently, but they can't play independently until they know how to play independently and find it reinforcing. So you're going to do it with them in the beginning, and you're going to reinforce, and you're going to make a visual schedule and say, okay, first, and it's got to be very visual because the 2-year-old for sure isn't reading yet, I would think. I'm going to assume again. So you've got, a drawing or a picture. Sometimes you can Google and get a picture of something or a line drawing of something if you're not an artist yourself. But, you show the picture of, first we're going to do this and then we're going to do this. And sometimes you even set a timer. Key is to make it fun. So all of the things in the semicircle to start with should be things that are fun. It may even be something that you're never going to have them play independently, but we're just teaching the idea first that we're going to move from this thing to this thing to this thing, right? And that you're reinforcing it. And then gradually over time, you would, maybe that afternoon you would make the schedule and say, okay, you're going to go from this to this, and you just pull yourself a little bit back. So the bell dings on the timer. Maybe they're at the easel first and the bell dings and you go, okay, everybody, whatever is exciting to them, maybe you do the hokey pokey before you move to the next thing, right? Whatever fun thing that you do that they find fun, or maybe it's just like, 2 minutes of tickling and now we move to the next thing, right? So that they go from one thing to the next thing, so that eventually, and you're pulling back. Each time that you do it, as you want to pull back just enough so that they're still engaging in the activity and you're doing a little bit less, but not so much that they come running over to you and say, I don't know what to do, or you know what I mean? So you're pulling back a little bit more each time. So eventually it's just you standing at the door and you've shown them the schedule and say, okay, you guys go and do these things. And maybe at the end, if they've done a good job, there's, a tea party with, lemonade and cookies or whatever the thing is that's reinforcing. I think it's really important. A lot of times we have the mentality of, I'll put a video on. And look, there's nothing wrong with putting a video on from time to time, but if all our children know how to do and occupy themselves with is a video or a game on the iPad, they're missing out a little bit, right? So doing those PlayStations helps to build a variety of different toys, and the likelihood that when you finally have faded yourself all the way back, that if your child gets bored with one thing, they know how to go to the next thing and play with that thing. But we really have to remember to teach and reinforce before we have the expectation that they're going to play on their own. By the way, it's the same thing with cleaning the room. We can't expect that they're going to clean the room when they're done until we've taught it and they've found it reinforcing. So we make it a game, we make it fun, and there's a reward at the end for having it done well. And this is the way that we can foster those independent play skills and the cleaning up afterwards. Because let's face it, you put 3 kids in a room and they're going to play independently, there's going to be a mess at the end. So then once you get into that, then you want to start to think about individual toys. And maybe depending on, because I'm thinking if they're 2, 4, and 6, if everybody's wanting to play with the same toy at the same time, that you're going to get into arguments, which is going to interrupt whatever it is that you're having to do. So eventually, maybe you have the play schedule and you have one for each one, and you have a timer that you set so that you're checking up on them and making sure that they're doing well. But when the timer goes off, so in the first one, the 6-year-old gets to play with the iPad, and the 4.5-year-old gets to play with the Mr. Potato Head, and the 2-year-old gets to play with the plushie. Right? And then when the ding happens, then, we rotate, and the 6-year-old's probably not going to want to play with the plushie, but maybe that's the time that, I'm trying to think of a 6-year-old, because I don't know whether boys or girls. Maybe they get to play with an interactive electronic toy that's not the iPad, right? And then the 4.5-year-old gets the iPad, and, the 2-year-old gets another appropriate, but you have their schedule for each one of them that, the first time you get to do this, and the second time you'll be helping to prepare them for kindergarten. You'll be teaching them how to wait for the toy that they want, and you'll avoid the arguments of them all wanting to play with the iPad. There are so many things that you can get, and I say iPad, but really tablet. There's so many different apps that you can do on a tablet that help foster independent skills for a child that are really reinforcing for them. It really kind of depends on the individual child and what they're into. And I would also ask that you consider what kinds of skills that you want to be developing for them. There are also games where they can play verses. I would think if they're 6 and 4.5 and 2, that it would probably be better to do apps that they're playing by themselves. And then in each category, there are going to be different things. The things you have to be concerned about, again, I'm still stuck on the fact that the 2-year-old, there are going to be toys that the 6-year-old and the 4.5-year-old are going to want to play with that aren't appropriate to leave independently with a 2-year-old because that's a choking hazard. So I'm hoping wherever you are, you have visual on that. Because otherwise you're going to be limiting the 6-year-old to toys that are appropriate for 2-year-olds, and that's going to be rough. That's going to be a tough situation because they're not going to be reinforcing to the 6-year-old. So I'm hoping that the configuration of your house is such that you still have good way of watching. I'm looking to see if you wrote anything in. But honestly, a lot of the things, if it's a short period of time, and it's not that often, a video. One of the games, actually, now that I'm thinking about, one of the games that I absolutely love that I bet you could get all 3 of the kids to play for at least a half an hour that would be appropriate. There's a game called Cranium has called Hullabaloo. And it comes in different ways. There's one where it's just a standalone piece and there are cards. It's kind of like a twist on Twister and Funny Bone kind of put together, if you remember those 2 old games. But you put these mats and cards on the floor that are different colors and have different creatures on them, and they push a button on the thing and it'll say, everyone do a dance and pretend you have a tail. So it's good pretend play. And then they'll say, everyone stop and get on a blue card. And everybody runs over to a blue card because there are multiple blue cards and each blue card has something different, and they'll say, look down. Are you standing on the whale? If you're standing on the whale, you're the winner. Do a happy dance. And you do the happy dance. And then it'll say, okay, now everybody pretend that you're a zebra. And everybody pretends they're a zebra, and they'll say, now, put your hand on a red spot. And everybody runs to find a red spot, and they're all over the place, because they're little tiles and you can throw them wherever you want in the room. And whoever has their hand on the crab, you're the winner, right? So it's very exciting and fast moving, but a 2-year-old could play it and a 6-year-old will think that it's really fun. There's also a video version of it that plays on the TV, and then you get to see other kids, and they're pretending that they have a trunk for an elephant and they are in the tail, and they're doing all this pretend play, and they show short little videos. And that's Cranium Hullabaloo. And there are many games that are along those kinds of lines that would be appropriate for a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old and a 4.5-year-old that has some special needs. So something like that, and that you can still be keeping a little bit of an eye on, but it will entertain them for a long period of time. Love Hullabaloo. There's also, look for other interactive DVD games that are like that, because it sort of steers the play. My son had one that was a SpongeBob DVD gameplay, and he loved it. It had 3D glasses that you could put on or not put on, and it was hilarious. And he loved to play that with therapists and with other kids and play dates, and they would just, fall on the floor laughing. So, all right, and I'll think on it more about things that are, because that's tough. 6, 4, and 2. Whew, bless you. Bless you, bless you, bless you. All right, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back with some more of your questions and taking a look at Facebook, so stick with us.
Hello, fellow activists. In our last segment, we talked about step number 2, educate yourself. Step number 3 is get support. Now, any journey can feel overwhelming if you feel like you're walking it alone. Well, you're far from alone, because with 1 in 50 kids diagnosed with autism today, there are a lot of us out there. Of course, there's always the issue of financial support. Now, there's a handful of organizations out there that offer financial support to families in need. ACT Today, or Autism Care and Treatment Today, is one of them. Visit our website at www.act-today.org to find out more about our grant process. I want to talk about a different kind of support today, emotional support. Now, you can get that from other travelers on this path. Some of the best advice I've ever received is from the moms of other kids with autism who went to school with Wyatt or were involved with programs with him. Then there are the pioneers. These are the families that have gone through this years ago, and there was very little information out there. All of these people seem to have the desire to pay it forward. Now, one of them, Lisa Ackerman, who is one of my mentors, started an organization called TACA, Talk About Curing Autism. She actually took the concept of mentors and support groups and made it available to everybody. You can go to their website, talkaboutcuringautism.org, to find out more. During the first and most difficult year after Wyatt's diagnosis, I wrote an email to close family and friends, letting them know what was going on and the challenges our family was facing and why we dropped out of sight. I was amazed at the outpouring of love and affection and all the help I received from that email. First, you have to be vulnerable. You can't be afraid to ask. Try this out. Could you cook me a meal? Are you going to the market? Can you pick me up a few things? Could your kids play with my kid and make them feel included? Or can you come over and clean my house? Well, maybe not that last one, except with your best friend. And maybe the best support of all is having someone that listens, and that doesn't cost a dime. So until next time, surround yourself with the loving kindness of others and keep the faith.
Welcome back to Autism Live. In this week where we're all a little food centric, we want to stop for a second and talk about healthy eating tips. And one of the things that somebody said to me the other day really struck home. They said, oh, I just know what's going to happen on Thursday. I can't wait for all this fabulous food. And I know I'm going to stuff myself. And, you know, because you don't get to try these things any other day but on that day. And one of the things that I'm trying to be mindful of this week, advice somebody else gave me about, you know, even though Thanksgiving is about sitting down and eating all these wonderful things, we don't have to wait for Thanksgiving. That if what you love is pumpkin pie, a lot of people are either buying or making their pumpkin pies today and tomorrow. So start having the pumpkin, have a little piece of pumpkin pie today and let that be the treat for today. And then tomorrow have something else that you like to have. You can still have it at Thanksgiving dinner, but this whole buildup of we're going to wait and wait and wait to have these things and then have all these favorite things all in one meal sets us up for being stuffed and unhappy. And so you can have a little bit every day. And for our kids on the autism spectrum, we want to be really mindful of the fact that a lot of our food traditions are not yet their food traditions. And that can be very disheartening. And we feel like, what we want you to have this thing. This is something that my family has made and we all love it. And it's a great tradition. For me, I'm thinking about the fact that it was such a big deal in my childhood that my mother always made oyster dressing. I know people have their favorites. They like their apple sausage, cornbread stuffing. My mother and my dad, it was all about the oyster dressing. And to me, it is not Thanksgiving dinner unless you make oyster dressing. I married a man who wouldn't go near an oyster. If you paid him, he would not go near an oyster. And, you know, so it feels a little crazy for me to just make it for myself. And I remember once trying to feed it to Jem, and he acted as though I had asked him to run around the earth 3 times fast in 5 minutes. It was just like, how preposterous of me. And I sort of gave up on it. I said, okay, you know, I don't think this is necessarily going to happen now. And I've told you before on the show that he has been in this frenzy of I want to try new things lately. And one of the things that about, 8 months ago that he wanted to try were smoked oysters. Not oyster dressing, but smoked oysters. And I said, okay, you know, I'll get a can of in all organic virgin olive oil oysters for you to try. And lo and behold, he is related to me. He loves them. And so he recently, I thought all those years when I talked about the the oyster dressing, that he wasn't listening, paying attention, or whatever. But he recently said to me, don't you make something that has oysters in it for Thanksgiving, like a stuffing? And I said, yes. And he said, oh, I can't wait to have that this year. So at 10, right? But I didn't push it. I offered it to him once and I didn't push it. And now it's come back around full circle. So I'm mindful of the fact, though, that there's other things that I know that I'm going to make for Thanksgiving dinner that are not going to be his cup of tea. So I'm focusing on what are the things that he does enjoy eating. My son loves turkey, loves mashed potatoes. He will have a sweet potato if it's baked in the jacket because he loves the skin more than anything else. So I don't need to put the marshmallows on it because that's not the way he likes it. For other kids, it's going to mean putting the marshmallows on. But, you know, that's already enough stuff to be a meal. And my son loves artichokes, and so we're having artichokes, which is not my family tradition, but it could be a new tradition. There's enough things. I don't have to have an argument with him, and he is going to try the oyster dressing. I'm going to guess he's still not going to like it because dressing and oysters, you know, I might be surprised, and I might be coming back to you next Tuesday and saying, guess what? He loved it. We'll see. But I'm not going to put too much store in it. I'm making a very small pan of it, and if he doesn't like it, it's not the end of the world, because Thanksgiving, in as much as we all think it's about the food, and it is about making sure that everybody has something to eat, but it's making sure that they have something to eat that they really love, because we're all sitting around enjoying each other's company. We're giving thanks for the food that we have. And so that's not about giving something to a child that they're not thankful for. And again, we've talked about this ad nauseum, that there are going to be people at the table who are going to have opinions about that. And the phrase that we say to ourselves is, other people's opinion of me and my parenting are none of my business. They just aren't. Other people's opinions of me and my parenting are none of my business. And then it's so much easier when you say it and you go, wow, you know what? That's absolutely right. They aren't any of my business. And then we can get back to doing what we need to do as parents and as people on this planet. So take care of yourself for Thanksgiving and take care of your children. Don't overindulge to the point of making yourself sick, feeling like this is the only day in which you can eat these things. It's not. And make sure that in the Thanksgiving meal, there are things for your finicky eater child to be thankful for. All right, we are going to take a break, and we'll be right back after these messages.
Hi guys, welcome back to Smarty. For November, we're going to be working on memory with our kids, and what better way than doing a scavenger hunt. The materials you'll be needing for this activity are a camera, cardstock, scissors, glue, and whatever objects you want your child to be hunting for. Step 1, you're the hunter. Find all the objects you want your child looking for and take photos of them. Now that you've collected all the objects you want your kids hunting for later, print out the images and then cut them out and glue them on a cardstock just so they're organized and isolated. Now that the scavenger hunt template is done, put all the objects back where they belong. Remember, we're working on memory, so put them in places that your kids would normally find them. You want them to be successful. We'll make this one really easy to find. Well, I hope you enjoyed this activity with your kids. Remember, the scavenger hunt is supposed to be a fun way to work on memory. Well, until next time, craft on, guys.
Can you see me flying by your side?
Welcome back to Autism Live. You know, we're going to be talking about some really tough things in the second hour and some news that's been out there the last few days that's, you know, it's a little bit disheartening. And whenever we can show you something that reminds us that while the world is a little different view for individuals on the autism spectrum, sometimes it's beautiful. And what's especially beautiful is when we have a moment when we can meld our view and their view for a second, so that just for a second we get to see a glimmer of, okay, this is how they see things. It's so enlightening, so enlightening. So somebody had posted on Facebook, and I saw it, and I just thought it was remarkable. A second grader, I believe it was a second grader, that was given a test, and you probably have seen this a little bit, and Emily's got the image of it that she's going to put up. And I don't know if we can see the directions on it, but it says, write the following words. Oops, I just messed up my thing. Write the following words in alphabetical order, the order they come in the alphabet, right? And it lists words like apple and pumpkin and log and river and fox. Now, for the rest of us, we would look at those directions and go, okay, well, apple comes before log, so apple's going to be my first one, right? But this child handed in their test, and I don't know if you can see it. So number 1 is AELPP. And I looked at that and I thought, what on earth? I didn't get it at all. It took me at least 2 minutes to look at it and figure out that he followed the directions. The directions say, put the following words in alphabetical order, the order that they come in alphabet. So taking the word apple and taking the letters as they appear in the alphabet, it's AELPP. And when you look at that and you go, of course, he followed the directions. This sweet, sweet child who's ever so much smarter than the rest of us followed the directions beautifully because he saw them clearly, where we know what's expected of us and don't pay attention. It is a very fascinating way to look at the world. I just want to hug this child. I may have shared on the show that we had a moment of similar enlightenment with our child that thankfully didn't come to any disastrous results, that they moved his setting recently from one room to another, and both teachers fabulous, both incredible teachers. And the new teacher, though, in getting up to speed, because she was given this much notice, was getting to know my child and getting brought up to speed on his case. And the kids changed classes to go to other classrooms for different elements of their program now in 5th grade. And so he'd been in another teacher's classroom, and he came back and he had a fistful of markers in his hand. And the teacher said, where did you get those? And he said, oh, I found them. Well, where did you find them? The only place you've been since you left was in another classroom. He said, well, they were laying on her floor in the other teacher's classroom, the classroom right next door. And the teacher said, oh, okay, well, you didn't find them then because they weren't lost. They were in her room, so they belonged to her, which I would have thought my son would have understood. But, he might have been trying to work her a little bit. I'm not sure. But in any case, she said, that's not appropriate. And we don't take things from other people's rooms just because they're laying on the floor. You need to take and give those markers back to that teacher right now. And Jem really gets upset if he feels like he's done something wrong. And he was like, oh, and he literally does that kind of move. He's like, oh. And so she said, go right next door and, go give her, that teacher needs to get her markers back right now. And so he went out the door, and he literally had to go 10 feet to get to the other door. And so, she in her head was taking care of things and counting of, okay, so he's at the door, he's giving the markers back, the teacher's talking about it, and he should be back now. And he wasn't back, and so she went out the door to see, what was going on, and he wasn't outside. And so she went to the teacher's door next door, and the teacher wasn't there, Jem wasn't there, and the class wasn't there. Jem had gone poof, right? And so some concern immediately, and so, there was a little bit of a, and calling the office, but, and saying, where is the class? Because she instantly knew what had happened, that the directions were to go give them back to the teacher immediately, that the teacher had to get them back. And if she's not there, right, leave them there for her. And my son still has some stuff to work on in terms of that. He was given the direction, give them back, and he knew it was important, and he was going to go and do it. So if she wasn't there, he was going to go look for her. So, right? Anyway, they very quickly identified that the teacher and her class were out on the playground for their PE time. And of course, that's where Jem was. He had located the teacher and had taken her the markers back. And so they brought him back to the classroom, and we've had discussions about, where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be. But he felt that he was doing what he was tasked with doing, and the teacher said, I need to be very careful about my words. And because a lot of times they're taken literally. The mom who went through a nightmare of 3 years because her child continued to wet the bed, and she just was in tears and said, I just don't even know what else to do. And then finally the next night when he wet the bed, and she was up at 2 o'clock in the morning and changing the sheets, and she said to him in a little bit of frustration, said, I just don't understand. Why don't you get up and go to the bathroom when you have to go in the night? And the child looked at her and he said, oh, I'm allowed to get up? You always tell me not to get out of bed. Right? And she said, oh, honey, I'm so sorry. You were allowed to get up and go to the bathroom when you need. And he said, I didn't know. And never had another accident. Never had another accident. So it just brings home this vision of how they see the world, and sometimes we're at cross purposes because we're not taking that into consideration. So I adore this child for letting us all see his vision of the world for just a minute and reminding us that we have some responsibilities here, and we need to be clear and we need to be precise, right? And then we also need to teach our kids to look at things, while we're looking at things from their point of view, we're teaching them to look at things from our point of view. And really that's what it's all about. But just beautiful. And I wrote on my Facebook, bless his little heart, he followed the directions. You have to love that. Okay, we're going to take a break, and we're going to go to the A Word. This is the ongoing documentary being made by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, following a little boy, Jack Riley, who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2. And Jack Riley is at a point now where he's made so much progress that many people might think, oh, well, isn't he done yet? But there is so much work to do to catch a child up. And even as we bring a child into awareness of things going on and awareness of other people, we need to give them the tools to deal with all the things that come with that. So take a look. This is the A Word. Let's see what Jack Riley is up to this week.
I know a cute little blue-eyed boy, and his name is Jack.
Jack Riley.
He got a big, warm, blue-eyed soul that makes your heart beat fast.
Exciting.
I say Jack, Jack, Jack is my buddy. Jack, Jack is my buddy. Everybody around is so down with Jack.
Hi, Diana.
Hi. What are you looking at? Is this Diana?
Hi, Diana.
Hi, Jack Riley. How are you?
Jack Riley has been in preschool for a few days now, with Jessica as his shadow. Today, his team meets to discuss how school is going, such as how Jack Riley's behaviors have been and how his teacher is handling him, and what they can do to help.
The first 2 days I was kind of feeling her out because she's actually new to teaching preschool, I guess, in general. So I didn't want to make her a little bit nervous. I was telling her, it's always okay to reinforce appropriate behavior. Don't forget to do that. Yeah. So I was showing her a lot with other kids as well as him.
Looks like there's room for growth. She just seems to is trying to get into the whole hang of preschool.
But I just reminded her why I'm there, to slowly wean myself out and have you take over.
Yes. How much are you able to back off and let him kind of do his thing?
Outside play, pretty much 95%.
Awesome. It's just the play.
It's just the outside play.
The tantrums, what's evoking the tantrums?
It was snack time, because they provide the snack at school, and yesterday it was bagels and cream cheese and diced pears, and he wanted neither. But instead of saying, hey, I don't want that, he started to flip out. And then I reminded him he had goldfish, he just has to use words appropriately.
Good job.
And then after that he wanted milk, but he didn't have milk.
You're almost done with the level. Okay.
So he got really, really upset, and then he felt that if he screamed it louder, he would get it. So I said, no, we just didn't have it.
So I told him once, and then it still wasn't okay. I had to pull him out because the other kids were getting a little bit uneasy. So I didn't want to direct him to him. So I let him have it outside for 2-3 minutes. After he calmed down, I just told him, you know, we don't have it. So either drink water or drink empty. That's just what we have. Sorry, dude. And he was fine after that.
If you're seeing that as like a reoccurring thing, then we can just teach them the rule. You know, if they don't have what you want, you say, oh, I wish they had milk, but okay, you know, teach them the replacement thing to say, and then we'll take data on in vivo. Is he able to use the replacement behavior that we've taught?
What'd you have for snack yesterday at school? What was there? But you didn't like it. What was there? Do you remember?
Peaches. And peaches are good.
What else?
Peaches are peaches good for me?
I love peaches. I think they're so good, and they're very good for you. They have lots of vitamins.
And what else?
I don't like them.
Yeah.
That's okay. You can just say, I don't like peaches. So you give the rule,
Okay.
have him practice, and then we'll take data on if he's able to implement the rule.
Should I be packing him a juice
box?
and
No. I think it's good to have him kind of be okay with if it's not there, it's not there.
As much as you can fade back, fade back. Only jump in during those times where he really needs you so we can.
So if I say, tell me about a dog, and then you would have to say, a dog has fur, it has a long tail, and 4 legs. Okay?
Some dogs.
Okay? So I'm going to ask you something. Tell me 3 things about Steven.
Steven is a teacher.
He's a teacher?
He just from his bat cave.
He came from his bat cave?
And he doesn't live on the street.
And he what?
And he doesn't live on the street.
And he doesn't live on a street? Okay, I'll take it. Tell me 3 things about a kitty cat.
A kitty cat's just an animal,
It's an animal,
and it's somebody's pet.
And it's somebody's pet.
And Sloan has one. And Sloan has a dog.
No, so it's a pet, it's an animal, and
it's fat.
And it's fat? Can you say something else about it? How many legs does it have?
4.
It has 4 legs. Okay, so tell me 3 things about a cat.
A cat
You said
is
it's a
somebody's pet.
somebody's pet?
And he has fur.
And his fur?
And he kind of has 4 legs.
And he has 4 legs! Very good! Tell me 3 things about Lainey Grace.
Lainey Grace is a baby.
She's a baby?
And she's 1 year old.
And she's 1 year old?
And she's my baby.
And she's your baby?
That's your baby?
She's my sister.
She's my sister.
Okay, so all by yourself. Tell me 3 things about Lainey Grace. All by yourself, go.
Lainey is small and
She's
1
small.
year old.
She's 1 year old.
And she's pretty cool.
And she's pretty cool? I think she's pretty cool too.
He makes my face hurt. I just grin. What I love about this series, and you can be watching all of the different shows and all of the different segments of this on their very own YouTube page, and I encourage you to always. But you get to see some of these things in practice and some of the differences of how we would do it if we didn't have ABA training. You know, I look at this, and a lot of us, it may or may not occur to you to teach things in the way we do with ABA that, you know, first we're teaching label, you know, this is a cat, and then later on talking about animals, and then looking at different features. We were talking about this with the Name 5 game that we were giving away last hour about being able to build the repertoire of not just a label of this is a cat, but, you know, different features that go to, and the fact that it's part of a class of animals, and that it's a classification of a pet, right? So you get into a space where you ask the child to name 3 things about the different labels that they know. Fascinating how this all builds upon itself. And I particularly loved this period of time that my son was learning, when these were the kinds of language things that he was taking on. And because their personalities start to really shine, and you see this with Jack Riley. So she's saying to him, you know, name 3 things about Steven. And you get to start to see, because I know, having talked to Jack Riley, one of the first things that Jack Riley is very interested in is, where do you live live, and is the name of the place that you live, is it a street or a road or a boulevard or whatever? He wants to know. For whatever reason, that's like one of his questions that that he asks on a regular basis. Excuse me, because it's fascinating to him. Like people's addresses, does it have that classification? And so apparently Stephen does not live on a street, whatever it is. And great. So then being able to see when he's talking about Lainey, and you see the therapist going through with him and saying, okay, so tell me 3 things. And she's prompting him because he gets a little stuck, but you see how seamless it is when she's doing it. And she's holding up the fingers to remind him, which is a form of a prompt, right? And eventually she'll stop doing that. They'll just be in a grocery store and she'll say, tell me 3 things that happened at school. And you know why I bring up that example? Because isn't that one of the things that we all say? Why can't my child tell me about what happens at school? You use these lessons and you will get there, right? If you're reinforcing it when they tell you things. So she's making it really fun and everybody's sitting around and laughing. So tell me 3 things about Lainey. And she's holding up the 3 fingers and, you know, and he says something and, you know, and she's counting them off and she's prompting him a little bit, right? And then she says, okay, now do it by yourself. But she's still giving him, you know, the different countdown on the fingers. And you notice that a lot of times he comes up with new things that she hasn't prompted him with aside. It's just, you begin to see how brilliant this little boy is and how much he sees, and he's grinning. She's like, yes, that's great. So she's giving him that kind of feedback, and there's that joint attention that we talked about earlier, because he's looking at the therapist and she says, tell me 3 things about Lainey, and he looks over at Lainey and he says, you know, she's a baby, and he looks at the therapist to say that, and then they both look back at Lainey. So you're getting that joint attention too that's happening, and they're giggling about it, that, you know, he says, she's my baby. And the therapist, you know, because that's not going to work if he's describing Lainey to somebody who doesn't know the circumstances. So she gives him the language, she's your sister. And he says, yeah. And she says, okay, tell me the 3 things about Lainey without any help, all by yourself. And instead he says, he says, you know, she's 1 and she's small and she's my sister and she's really cool. You just gotta love that, right? So this is how these things build. So eventually he's gonna be able to just make conversation about his sister, and somebody's gonna be able to ask him and say, oh, do you have any siblings? And he's gonna say, yes, I have a sister, Lainey, and she's 2 years old, and she likes the color purple. Whatever it is he decides to tell that will be age appropriate at that age. But we need to acknowledge the fact that unlike in a typically developing child where that just sprouts, we have to go back and do all the lessons to get to them to the point where they do that. It was fascinating to watch that happen with my child. Really, really fascinating. So, you know, I could talk endlessly about this, but we're going to take a break. Before we go to break, I want to remind everybody that, I don't know why I put it so far from myself in here, the toy, the item that is part of today's giveaway for this hour is the Marvel Science from Uncle Milton. This particular one is Iron Man. It's the Iron Man Repulsor Ray Tech Lab. This is that really awesome toy that they demoed for us last week, that it looks like the thing that sits in Iron Man's chest, and you flip it up, and it comes with, I think it comes with 2 different balls, and you push a button and the little fan goes and it levitates the ball, but it takes some finesse. The guy made it look like really easy, but it takes some finesse, but kids can do it. And then it has little hoops that they can move it through and play with their friends. It's a cool toy. Marvel Science Repulsor Ray Force Ray Tech Lab for Iron Man. And that comes to us from Uncle Milton. So be watching during this hour for the word or phrase that appears on the screen. When you see it, you're going to want to email. Emily's going to show you the email address. There it is. Send an email to us. In the subject line, put Marvel Science, Iron Man. You don't have to put Repulsor Ray Tech Lab. You can say Iron Man, Repulsor Array, you could say Marvel Science, you can even say Uncle Milton, okay? So you got a lot of different things you can choose from, but in the body of the email, make sure that you put down the word or phrase that Emily shows on the screen at some point during the show. So We're going to take a break. When we come back, Matt Asner is here from Autism Speaks. He's an awesome autism dad, as I mentioned. We were together with a group of other people. There's a picture of all of us working hard last night. We're going to talk about what we were doing, the grant process, and have you guys can ask questions if you want. But it was a really wonderful event, and so Matt and I are going to share with you what it was like being there last night. So stick with us back after these messages.
Hi everyone! Thanksgiving is fast approaching, and we thought it'd be really fun to teach you a gluten-free stuffing recipe with help from Breads from Anna. Now this is a 2-day recipe, and so day 1 we're going to make this bread. Here's what you're going to need. 1 package of Breads from Anna bread mix, 1 packet of active dry yeast, 3 eggs, 1 tablespoon apple cider vinegar, 2 tablespoons sugar, 1/4 cup of oil, 1/2 cup of warm water, 1 teaspoon ground sage, thyme, rosemary, 1 tablespoon of dried parsley, and then a pinch of tarragon, onion powder, marjoram, and garlic powder. On day 2, when we put the stuffing together, here's what you'll be needing. 6 tablespoons of butter, 1/2 bulb of fennel, 1 chopped onion, 2 chopped carrots, 1/2 cup of gluten-free chicken broth, 1 teaspoon of ground sage, thyme, and 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt and pepper. All right, step 1, we're gonna dissolve our sugar into our water. And then we're gonna go ahead and add our active yeast. We're gonna dissolve all these together. So we're gonna just set this aside. Now we're gonna take our bread mix right on over to our mixer. So first things first, we're gonna put all our liquids together before we add in our dry bread mix. We're putting in 3 eggs, our oil, apple cider vinegar, water, and our water, yeast, sugar mixture. We're gonna blend these all together. So once our liquids are all mixed together, we're gonna go ahead and add our bread mix. We're also going to add all of our spices now. Okay, now that our bread's been mixed, we're going to spoon this into a bread dish and we're going to let it rise for about an hour. Okay, so now that we've let this rise for about an hour, we're going to bake it at 375 for another hour. All right, it's been an hour, so let's grab our bread out of the oven. We're gonna let this cool for a little bit, and then we're gonna actually cube the bread, and we're gonna toast it in the oven just a little bit longer to dry it out so that when we add it to the vegetables, it'll make a really great stuffing. So as you can see, we've toasted our little breads here in the oven, and now what we're gonna do is saute some of these vegetables so that we can mix it in with the bread and make our final stuffing combination. So we'll start with the butter. So we're going to start with our onions so that we can make sure these are good and cooked before we add the other vegetables. They cook a little bit longer. Okay, those are looking pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and add our fennel, our carrots, our garlic, and then all our spices. So you're going to want to cook this until the carrots especially are nice and soft. Our vegetables are pretty soft here, so what we're going to do is go ahead and mix this with our bread. We're also going to go ahead now and add our 1/2 cup of broth. So once these are mixed together, we're going to go ahead and pour it into our greased baking dish, and we're going to bake it an additional 20 minutes at 350 degrees. All right. Okay, I think it's ready. La, la, la. All right, and we can add a little garnish here. Perfect, and it's ready for Thanksgiving dinner. To learn how you can win some breads from Anna, go to our Facebook page at facebook.com/autism-live. Until next time, happy holidays.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We're so thrilled that once again we welcome back Matt Asner, awesome Autism Dad,
Thank
and
you.
also the we can't leave this out, Executive Director of Autism Speaks Southern California. That's quite a title because you encompass quite a big area.
As we found out last night.
And I mentioned this a little bit at the start of the show because we weren't sure about the guest roster this morning, and we weren't able to hook up with Alex Plank, but you have managed to be here, although it was a really long night last night.
And it was tiring.
I was exhausted when I left, but I talked to us about this just ever so briefly at the top of the show. Tell the folks what we were doing last night.
Well, we had a bunch of people getting together to do the second tier of grant review for our community grants. And we reviewed 53 grants, I believe.
It was
53.
It was a lot.
And 30 of those will go to the board. And then the board will vote on 20 of them. So we're going to give 20 grants out.
So 20 of those grants, and those are community grants.
Yeah.
So it's part of help us to understand, because some of the money raised gets to stay locally.
Yeah. So that's one of the important things that that we're really kind of trying to concentrate on now is really making an impact in the community that we're in, and so through Sprouts, we're able to do our local initiatives and fund the local initiatives. So we're excited. We're really excited. And this is the second year. Last year we gave 5 grants out. This year we're giving 20. So.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing. I'm calling it an event because I don't know what else you would call it, but it was amazing to be there.
Yeah.
Because the vast array of people who were there was so inspirational.
Yeah, it's important to have a great cross section of people. So we had moms there, we had dad there, we had a person on the spectrum there, which is great. We had service providers. So we really wanted the community to be represented in choosing who gets these grants.
Yeah.
So it was great, and it was impartial.
Yep.
You stepped out of the room a few times.
Yes, I did. Anytime there was somebody who you had a relationship with, you stepped out of the room so that you weren't a part of the discussion, so you couldn't be lobbying for friends.
Exactly.
And so I made a couple of trips out of the room.
You did.
In support of the process, so that it would be fair and impartial.
Exactly. And, one of the great things about it is, a lot of these people, they raise funds for us, or they represent us in some way. And it's wonderful that they're a part of the process, that they're able to kind of see the process and how it works and how we decide who gets these funds. So it was a great evening. I thought it was a great evening.
It really was, and an amazing cross section of people who were asking for grants, and from a variety, because Southern California is a very big area.
Yeah, and that was one of the great things, is you see where these grants are coming from. And we had grants coming from Santa Barbara, from Ventura, from Temecula, from San Diego, from Orange County, a lot of them from Orange County and Los Angeles. So we represented Southern California last night.
And truly remarkable. And the people who were on the panel were really a cross-section of all those different areas as well. And to see all the different programs, it was quite exciting. And the discourse was fascinating about prioritizing, because if you could, how much money could you give away, right? How much money would you want to give away? But even knowing that there were 20 grants, there was discussion about, well, this will have a bigger impact than this based on, and lots of discussion and enlightenment. I thought it was really quite remarkable, and I'm a little sad.
You guys worked hard. You guys all worked hard. I was impressed.
I burned brain cells. I worked as hard as I could, and it really was amazing.
There's a picture of you guys on Facebook that I took.
I saw that.
You guys didn't notice I was taking that picture.
No, I did not.
And you were all very hard at work.
I think I would have primped a little had I known.
That's okay.
But it really was amazing. And then how soon do people get notified? Because you have another. This was tier 2, and you have a third tier.
Third tier. The third tier happens next week. The board votes next week, and we will be notifying people sometime in December. as to whether they got the grant or not.
And I would think very exciting for them. And before we close on this subject, I want you to talk about that there were 4 different categories that they could enter in.
Yeah, you're going to test me now.
Well, I might be able to remember some of them as well.
Well, young adult services, education, and the others were...
There's recreation, community and recreation.
Yeah.
And then wasn't the other one for older kids, transition?
Yes.
So it was young adult, and then there was the older kid transition, education, and recreation, which I thought, you know, that really encompasses a lot of areas where we need to see growth.
And it hits, you know, 2 of the major initiatives that we have right now, which one is young adult services, and the other is early access to care. So.
And one of the things that we were particularly tasked with, that it said on the grant application, was, you know, are these things that are replicable?
Right.
Are these things that will have an impact? What will the impact be? Is it detailed? And are these things that in any way help to serve underserved populations?
Yeah.
Which I thought was remarkable. Those weren't the only criteria. There were many, many more criteria, and we went back over the criteria just about like every 20 minutes. Somebody would have a question, and Matt would pull it back up.
Yeah, and that was interesting, actually. I was impressed with people because they really took it seriously, and a question would come up, and we'd have an open discussion about it.
Yeah.
And it was great.
It was taken very seriously. We all were, and scores were compared against other people's scores, and if there was a variance between the scores, people said, here's why, and there was again the discourse. It was kind of amazing. It was a wonderful process, and I thank you for inviting me. It was an opportunity of a lifetime. I'm really glad that
I hope you'll come again.
Absolutely, I'm happy to give away your money. Are you kidding me? Why? And to weigh in on what I think would be vital. I think everybody would like a shot at that. So
I'm open to anyone being a part of it.
There you go. So. There you go. You heard it here. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back, and Matt and I are going to talk a little bit about one particular story in the news and some of the questions that you guys have been writing in. So you can get a 2-parent opinion poll on some of the things that you guys have been writing in. So stick with us.
Skills is an online program that provides assessment, curriculum, positive behavior support planning for challenging behavior, and progress tracking, and it does this all in one place. The Skills Assessment and Curriculum addresses 8 areas of development, which even includes advanced higher level areas such as executive functions and cognition, which pretty much makes Skills the only ABA-based set of curricula for teaching more complex skills, things like problem solving, planning, self-management, perspective taking, and even inferring and predicting others' private events. Skills is a 4-step system. Step 1 is to add the child to your account. Step 2 is to start assessment. The Skills Assessment is the only ABA-based assessment with psychometric research demonstrating the language subscale to have excellent reliability. Every area of human functioning and typical child development from infancy to adolescence was researched, making the Skills Assessment the most comprehensive of its kind in the world, and we're quite proud of that.
Skills is easy to use. Simply click Start Assessment and begin answering questions. Or simply type in a keyword, find specific activities to assess, and add activities to treatment. Step 3. Choose activities. Once you've completed the assessment, Skills selects from a pool of 4,000 activities categorized by age, level, and skill type to provide you with exactly those activities each child needs. Start by choosing a curriculum, then a lesson, and finally an activity. Click the information icon to view prerequisites, ages in which targets develop, examples, and IEP goals. Click the video icon to watch a short video. Once you've identified an activity you want to teach, adding activities to treatment is a snap. Step 4. Start treatment. Here you can access customizable activity lesson details, add your own customized targets and exemplars, and edit an activity status such as introducing or mastering it. You can even print handouts such as worksheets, tracking forms, visual aids, and other materials. Skills also offers multiple progress charts mapping curriculum progress, lesson progress, and cumulative number of activities and targets mastered over time. The Skills language curriculum is categorized by verbal behavior type so that users can identify progress for verbal operants, such as echoics, mands, attacks, and interverbals.
Skills is one of the only programs that provides the ability to write behavior intervention plans, or BIPs, for challenging behavior.
With just a few clicks, the outline of the behavior intervention plan is written for you and ready to be printed and implemented.
You can learn more about Skills today and get started by visiting us at www.skillsforautism.com, or you can call us at 877-975-4559. Skills. Progress starts here.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are here with Matt Asner. He's an autism dad. You're an autism brother.
I am.
You're an autism advocate.
Autism friend.
There you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you are the executive director of Autism Speaks Southern California. Is that the biggest chapter of Autism Speaks? Putting you on the spot here.
That is putting me on the spot.
It's got to be one of the biggest ones.
It's one of the biggest, yeah.
Yeah.
If not, I mean, New York certainly has, Chicago is huge.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
but at
Florida,
least in the Big Five.
Yeah, it's definitely in the Big Five.
It's a big responsibility. Let's say that. And so he's here with us. And I wanted to have you, you're a great person to talk about current topics with. And we've had a story that we haven't been able to cover here on the show yet because we've been off for the weekend. A teenager in Iowa, 13-year-old with Asperger's syndrome, Levi Null, who was having some difficulty at school, and the parents had complained to the principal about some bullying that was happening. The parents feel that they weren't getting a whole lot of conversation back on it or anything being done. It culminated with some of the classmates who were participating in the bullying videotaping some quote-unquote bullying of Levi, that they thought that was interesting enough that they themselves, the bullies, decided, the quote-unquote bullies, decided to post it on internet for people to look at.
They were proud of their bullying.
Apparently they found it amusing and funny, and the parents, of course, of the young man, Levi Null, were upset enough, went to the school. The principal did require them to take the video down, so we do not have the ability to look at the video to see what was on it at this point.
Have you seen the video?
I have not seen the video, but of more concern to me is that the principal issued a statement and said, well, technically this does not qualify as bullying, that the main person who was apparently engaged in whatever the activity was on the video was reprimanded, and we don't get to know exactly how because they're high school students, but for bigotry, but not for bullying. So this to me, I'm like, this principle for me is on shaky ground.
What's the difference?
Thank you. We're going to talk about that. But there's more to this because when the principal said it isn't bullying by the definition of the student handbook, but we're going to reprimand him for bigotry and there will be consequences for that. The local news, WHO, covered it, and the response from it's a very small school, the response from the parents in that school district, over 100 parents wrote in with comments and said, this child asks for it.
Oh.
One parent of one of the boys who was in trouble for the bullying said, maybe 25% of this is my child acting inappropriately, and I'll take care of that. But the other 3/4 of this, the child brought on himself.
And did they say how the child brought this on himself?
Apparently he says things that are inappropriate.
Okay.
And that are, in their estimation, vulgar. I don't, have a lot more than that. One aunt said that Levi called her nephew she said he spoke to him and called him a vulgar name, and that in response to that her nephew popped him in the mouth, and she said, and I'm happy that he did, he had it coming.
Yeah. Okay.
So another parent said he definitely doesn't belong. This is a direct quote. He definitely doesn't belong in the community school if he's calling other kids names. Whether it's a condition or not, other kids shouldn't have to suffer being called names because of Levi's condition.
Maybe he's calling them names because there's some bigotry going on.
Somebody else said, I raised 4 kids in that school. Believe me, the bullying is terrible, and what's worse is the staff turning their backs. So all of the comments weren't necessarily saying he had it coming, but over 100 parents writing in and saying this child brought it upon himself.
Okay, let's assume that some of that is true. Let's assume that he has said some offensive things to some people. Yeah. He still doesn't deserve to be hit. He doesn't deserve, and my feeling is look the other way. Be the bigger man. Look the other way. If someone is bugging you, then look the other way. Are they saying that he's bullying them?
I don't know. I hear this argument about it's not appropriate for him to say things and that children shouldn't have to put up with that.
And you know what? I agree with that.
I agree with that as well. But on the meter of, we teach this to our kids all the time, that, equal and even reactions, right? And being the bigger person. Yeah. But if someone calls you a name, I don't know in what student handbook it's equal and even reaction to pop them in the mouth.
Honestly, I think the failure here is the school and the administration.
Thank you.
And dealing with the situation in a way that's going to make everyone happy. Mm-hmm. It sounds like, and let's assume that that's true. Let's assume that he has said some offensive things. Why has he said some offensive things? Is he maybe he's frustrated? Maybe he's frustrated because he's not being treated well. Mm-hmm. There are lots of issues that need to be talked about here, and it sounds like the school is backing away and using semantics to get through this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know too, you're somebody who knows a little bit about Tourette's and about teens with Tourette's.
No, my best friend growing up, Adam Seligman, had horrible Tourette's syndrome, awful, and we became inseparable. He was a little older than I was. He was 2 years older than I was. Mm-hmm. But we became inseparable in school. I met him when I was 11, and after that we were just inseparable. And, he had a horrible case of Tourette's syndrome, just awful. He had echolalia. He had something called coprolalia, which is basically the words you are most inhibited from saying, you say.
Right.
You not only say, you blurt them out.
Right.
So we had, we were chased from movie theaters. He was bullied all the time.
And I'm sure that people thought, oh, this is something he can control.
Of course, because everyone else can control it.
Right.
And, he would call people terrible things because he couldn't help it. Mm-hmm. And it was what he was most inhibited from saying. And maybe he felt those things, but he could not help saying them.
Right.
Couldn't help it. And I remember after the riots in Los Angeles, he was most inhibited from saying the N-word. And so we would go out to dinner or a movie theater, and we'd be sitting there, and he would yell these things out, this horrible word, it's an awful word, out. And we would have huge problems.
Sure.
I mean, there would be people who wanted to kill him.
And imagine.
The amazing thing about him was he was able to diffuse the situation with knowledge. So he would explain to these people what was going on, why he was doing it, and he not only had verbal outbursts. He grunted. He did all these things, and I think probably the most antisocial of all of it was he spat. So he would spit. He'd be in a living room with someone that he didn't know, and he would be spitting on the floor, and it was horrible.
And probably not pleasant.
No.
For the people around him to be around, and yet a wonderful human being.
No, honestly, it taught me an amazing lesson in my life, and I think helped me as a father and a brother of someone who has issues.
Yeah.
He taught me patience. He taught me there's power in knowledge, and I owe him a lot because he taught me a great deal about life.
Yeah. Remarkable, that he had a friend in you and that you had a friend in him. I think it's a great story of what can be accomplished. And I'm with you that in this particular story, I see the hugest failure on the part of the school, because if there's any person who could start to bring this community together to help all of these, it has to be the school.
That said, I've heard these stories before. They're out there, unfortunately.
Yes.
And I remember there was a story that happened somewhere near Pasadena, where a child was in a similar situation. I'm doing this through recall, and my mind isn't what it used to be. So,
join the club.
But I think what happened was this child was in the same kind of position, and the administration of the school had a like a town hall meeting, and invited the children to this town hall meeting, which is really not a good thing to do. And so all these children were witness to the parents arguing about what's going on with this kid, and people need to learn about what's going on.
Yeah.
And obviously, there's some frustration in this child. And why is there frustration? How do you deal with the frustration? How can you get through it? Because there's got to be a way. There's another family, I think, and they're in Pasadena as well, who have had a terrible time with the school there, in terms of the school trying to keep the child away from other children. And I mean, we're talking about taking him out of the classroom, putting him in broom closets, teaching him in basically closets where there's cleaning materials and stuff like that. And it's not an option. We've got to do better at policing that kind of activity and making sure that people are accountable, that school administration, school officials are accountable for what they do.
Yeah. Well, we're going to continue to talk about this, and if you guys have things that you want to write in as well, your thoughts and feelings about this, because it's a little devastating to see such an outcry from a group of people saying, oh, no, this is appropriate, that any 13-year-old ever could be bullied by a group of people for any reason, not appropriate. So we're going to talk a little bit more about bullying and some of our thoughts on this, so stick with us.
The Institute for Behavioral Training provides courses in applied behavior analysis for the treatment of autism. Access IBT e-learning videos on the move and learn at your own pace.
I'm going to talk a little bit about intensity of
IBT e-learning makes any location your classroom on the go.
So our objectives for today are to really learn what is autism and how is it diagnosed.
Get professional guidance with IBT face-to-face training. IBT face-to-face training courses prepare you to effectively implement ABA-based interventions. Choose between small group and one-to-one instruction. Earn BCBA supervision hours via one-to-one video conferencing.
So I had a chance to review your BIP today. You know what? It looked really good. You did a good job with it.
IBT continuing education courses. Earn credit through webinars, conferences, article reviews, and e-learning videos. You can learn more at ibehavioraltraining.com. IBT, 360 degrees of ABA training.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are here right now with Matt Asner, awesome Autism Dad. I love saying that. We don't get enough dads on this show, and so I'm thrilled that you're here to present that point of view. And also the Executive Director of the Southern California chapter of Autism Speaks. And we've been talking a little bit about this story that's been breaking over the last week in Iowa, in central Iowa. Levi Null, 13-year-old with Asperger's diagnosis. And by all the accounts of the neighbor, he's having some challenging behavior in the classroom setting. But there was some bullying that took place, and according to the people in the parents of the kids that go to school, it's appropriate because he's engaging in challenging behavior. And we went through some of the quotes that were written in after a local news story that was done, and one parent saying, well, then, maybe he doesn't belong at this school. This is very pervasive. I've seen this time and time again, that when kids don't easily slide in, and if there's any possibility that they're going to make it even remotely tough for another kid, well, then they shouldn't be here. They should have to go someplace else.
And that's the problem, isn't it? Because
I have to say, it's right at the bottom of it, isn't it?
Well, when you have people that are that are not affected by what's going on, autism or Asperger's, whatever you want to call it, you have a problem, because if they're viewing it as something that is affecting their child's ability to learn or be peaceful in class, then there's a problem, and the school, it's up to the school to figure out a way to make everyone happy.
Yeah.
Because that child deserves an education.
Has a legal right to it.
An inclusive education.
A legal right to it.
And, they've got to make it work.
They do have to make it work.
And they need to temper the frustration of the other parents and students, because they're not doing a good job. It sounds like they're putting out the fire with gasoline.
And this decision to just back off of it, as you said, because that's what it sounds like to me too. That this principal, and the principal has been asked for a quote from a lot of different outlets, and has said he doesn't want to comment on it. I would just say to this principal, Mr. N, you got to jump in with both hands. And if you need some help and support, I think we both know people who would be willing to talk to you about how you might want to go about this and get some more information about what you need to do. But you need to be the leader in your community. You need to be the leader at your school and make this something that it's a safe environment for everyone to learn, not just for kids who follow rule A, B, and C. If we were to put the shoe on the other foot and say the child who hit, well, we don't allow hitting in the school, so that child does not deserve to get to be at a school because he's violent, I'm sure we get a lot of comments from a lot of parents about that as well. It's got to be a safe environment for all of these different kids. But you're right, Matt, when people don't... Yes?
No, I'm just... I know what bigotry means, but I wanted the exact definition of what bigotry is.
Okay.
So bigotry is intolerance toward those who hold different opinions from oneself. The report reveals racism and right-wing bigotry. So we're talking about something, and let's look up bullying.
Yeah, let's look up bullying.
So let's get an exact definition of bullying.
Because we have legal laws against handicap harassment. I mean, bullying is one thing in schools, but if there's also laws about handicap harassment, and if anybody uses someone's handicap to taunt them that prevents them from their education, that's federal law.
Okay, so we have intolerance towards someone's beliefs or whatever.
Okay, for bigotry.
Okay, that's bigotry. So, and here's bullying.
Okay.
Or bully. Use superior strength or influence to intimidate someone, typically to force him or her into doing what the other person wants. So, okay, so you have someone who's intolerant and voicing their intolerance, or showing physical intolerance towards the person. But I guess you're not. He's probably
not forcing them to do something else.
He's looked up the definition and decided that it's more like bigotry. But I mean.
But if it's bigotry based on his handicap, that would seem to me that it would qualify under handicap harassment, which is actually worse than bullying.
I know. So take some ownership here.
Yes. Yes.
He's using it as an excuse, and there's no ownership.
Right.
Take some ownership.
Yes. Time to step up. But if you need some help, I know some people who could probably help and consult with you to get some help. I'm sure that you know some people as well.
Actually. I'm telling you right now, he's actually opening himself to possible litigation by calling it bigotry, because if he doesn't do anything about it, there's a problem there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. But I want to go back just briefly to talking about part of the difficulty is that parents who don't know what parents like us are dealing with are, and I mean it in the sense of what the word means, ignorant. It is. I don't think it's any malfeasance. It is pure. They don't understand. The example that I always like to give, the beautiful, hilarious example, going to one of those bouncy house parties where it's the whole warehouse room full of bouncy houses, and kids are running around everywhere, going to the top of the slide and jumping down the slide. And there was one little girl my son was probably 5, and there was a little girl who was 4 or 5 who was a little timid at the top of the slide. And so the boys were running up and then going past her and going in front of her, and it kept making her not go. So nobody else was talking to their kid, but every time my kid would come down, I would call him over, and he'd be wanting to go back to the slide. I would call him over and I would say, Jem, there's a little girl up there. You have to wait until she goes. And he'd be waiting to go back. Well, the little girl's mom at one point turned to me and she said, is he sick? And I said, well, what? And she said, does he have a cold? And I said, no. What? No. And she said, okay, are you sure? Because he shouldn't be here if he has a cold. And I had no idea why this woman was attacking me, right? But I said, no, my child doesn't have a cold. He goes back up the slide, and all the other boys are coming down the slide, and he comes down the slide. I call him off the slide again, and I call him over, and he's wanting to get back. And I said, make eye contact with me. I'm right here, pal. And I made him wait, and I said, I don't care who else is doing it. You go to the top of that slide and you wait till she goes down. You might be there for the next hour and he's looking away. I said, look at me. right here. And so eventually he goes back up the slide and she goes, he is sick. That child is sick. He has a cold. And I said, I beg your pardon. My child does not have a cold.
Right.
And she said, I can tell he's a little glassy-eyed and he's not making eye contact with you. And that means he has a cold. He's going to have a cold tomorrow and he's going to get my child sick. And in that moment, I went, oh, okay. All right. In her world,
right,
when a child doesn't make eye contact,
that means they're sick.
That means they're about to get a cold.
Right.
I could be really frustrated and mad at her, but in her world, in her happy little world, which I don't want to begrudge her, that's what that means. This is an educational moment. And I said to her, my son has autism. That's why he's having difficulty. He doesn't have any germs. He has autism. And she says, oh my gosh, you would never know.
Except for the not looking, the person in the eye.
And I did say that to her, but it was that moment of I am staring in the face of what the world thinks about autism.
Right.
She doesn't get it.
Yeah.
She doesn't get, and it's not because she's mean or unintelligent. She is just plain ignorant.
Yeah.
And I don't know what would have happened if I wasn't there. She was so concerned that my child was going to give her child a cold.
She probably would have taken her daughter off the slide, I would imagine.
We'd like to think that. I don't think that's the direction she was going.
Right.
I think she was going to say that he couldn't go on the slide. I think we were like 2 slide turns away from that had I not been there. Yeah. Which is a lot the same as this circumstance.
Yeah, it is.
Your kid can't do it the way my kid can, and your kid is frustrating my kid, then your kid goes. My kid stays. It's not that my kid has a problem with tolerance.
And that's the problem. I mean, I think there's a certain amount of mob mentality that happens when this stuff happens, and that's unfortunate. I mean, it's easy to blame someone.
Yes.
Rather than deal with the situation.
Or teach.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to teaching? Here's a wonderful educational moment to talk with these kids about, there are lots of things that you have different than your friends.
Yeah.
That friend has more money than you have. That doesn't make you less than. Mm-hmm. This friend, it seems to be able to eat anything they want and not exercise and fit into that size that you wish you could be. That doesn't make them better than you. We're all on this planet different.
And when I had my friendship with Adam, when I became friends with Adam, my parents told me later, they said, we were very concerned because obviously there were issues with Adam.
Sure.
And so I think one time my mom said, well, why did you choose him as a friend? It's just so interesting. And I said, he was the smartest person I've ever met. And he taught me things, that no one else could have taught me. And
isn't that the thing that we all wish for our kids now? I mean, I want my child to have the friend that he had in you. Mm-hmm. We had,
and honestly, I mean, one thing that I can say about Adam is he didn't have any other friends. He had no other friends.
Yeah.
And I was his only friend, and we were best friends.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I could be there for him because it would have been hard.
But you weren't friends with him in spite of the things that he did. You were friends with him because of who he was.
And that's a gift. I didn't care about what he did.
Right. And that's a gift that every person on this planet deserves to have.
And I credit my parents for that because obviously they did something right.
Well.
Because even though that they questioned it and that they didn't understand it,
right.
They must have done something right because I was able to see past that.
Yeah.
And have an understanding with him.
Well, and it wasn't without benefit to you. We shouldn't leave that out because it has enriched your life in so many different ways.
I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't had that experience.
And I think a lot of times when people talk about inclusion schools, parents get afraid of what is this going to mean. And yet when we see when inclusion truly works and works well, and when principals take responsibility and the staff takes responsibility and the parents take responsibility, that the kids who are in the classroom that are the special needs kids grow and flourish and get along better, and the kids who are not special needs grow and flourish and become human beings that go into the world and change the world.
Right.
And isn't that something we could all get behind?
I would hope so.
yeah, be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. So again, reaching out to that principal, we hope that you will take a stand and get involved and be part of the solution, not a part of the problem. We're going to take a short break. Do you want to stay to close out the show, or do you want to go?
I think I'm going to go because I have a phone call at 12.
Okay. So we thank Matt Asner for being here, and we hope that you have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Are you back with us next week?
I am.
Okay.
And everyone out there, have a great Thanksgiving. It's my favorite holiday.
All right. Stick with us, because we're going to come back to close out the show, and we're going to talk a little bit about tomorrow's show with Dr. Grandpichet, the Anxiety Show. She's going to talk for a whole hour about anxiety and OCD issues. You're not going to want to miss that, so stick with us more on that after these messages.
When Maddie was diagnosed, I'll be honest, I was very ignorant on what autism was. I knew that autism was basically something that hit boys at the age of 2 to 3 and shut down. And sometimes you think of the typical Rain Man movie. And with Maddie, she was doing all the same signs and symptoms of a typical child with autism spectrum disorder.
Stand up. She didn't even acknowledge us coming into the room. She had barely any eye contact. She didn't interact with her sisters. She didn't really do anything. She just basically lined up her toys, and that was about it. We have a team of 7 volunteers, or 8 now. We have 8 volunteers, including my husband and I. And I'm the team leader, and so I do all the curriculum and get everything ready each week.
Jana was downstairs until 11 o'clock at night working on curriculum, going through 2 different textbooks. And then we, as a group, meet on Monday nights, and we would go through what the curriculum was from Jana. And a lot of times we would go, well, how exactly do you do that? How do you sit her at the table and do this trial base? Well, what Skills has done for us, it's taken that away from Jana trying to figure out the curriculum for one. She can go down, or even our laptop, and she can sit down, and through all these questions, it comes up with the different programs.
At least for me, it was a relief off my shoulders. I was worried that I might be missing something, missing a curriculum that maybe she needs to know, where Skills, they have every possible thing your child needs to know from 0 to 7. They have a program for that.
What noise is this?
Good job! Every program that we did with her, I knew it was specific for what she needed to learn. Because before Skills, it was a lot of, okay, well, is that really age appropriate for a 2-year-old? You know, because it's not generalized. It's anywhere from 0 to 7. This is what your child needs to know. In most manuals, you'll find. But for this, okay, yep, she should be learning this. And no, she's not 4 yet. She doesn't need to know that yet.
We are so fortunate that Jana was able to attend a conference put on by CARD that opened the door for Skills, and that there's no looking back for us.
We started using the program in November, and it seemed like by January something just clicked, and she has completely kind of came out of her fog that she was in for quite a while.
I have never read a documented case on any child that has not benefited anything from applied behavior analysis, and now with this new Skills and being, you know, like the E version of ABA, I can't imagine it doing anything harmful to their child. It's nothing but exponential growth for us.
To see her now, it just blows us away. I mean, we call her our little miracle child because in 7 months' time, she has just blossomed into this normal, functioning child, and suddenly, we joke about it all the time, like suddenly we have twins.
If you're even thinking about doing it, do it. Because the absolute worst thing you could do is do nothing at all. And even if you use this program and it's just a single mom or a single dad working in the evenings with their child, this program is going to benefit them. It's going to show you where they are, it's going to show you where they need to go, and it's going to show you what skills and how to get there. It is an online book on how to help recover your child.
Welcome back. We're here at the end of the show. A couple of quick reminders. Tomorrow, Ask Dr. Doreen, the whole first hour, we are going to be talking about anxiety. It's the anxiety show that you guys have been asking for. It's tomorrow. Write in your questions tonight. She's going to talk for quite a while, and then she's going to answer questions. So maybe some of the questions will be answered in the talk, but send in those questions. Also, a couple of different things that people wrote in. First, somebody had written, "Hi, Shannon, I would like to ask your guest what made him look past the difficulties of his best friend and still wanted to become his friend." And I asked Matt that question as he was walking out the door, and he said there was just something there. There was just something there. I think he has a clear ability to see people and value them, and he clearly, there was something there, and he saw it. Another person who wrote in and said, "My 11-year-old son with mild ASD is a very picky eater. I'm not looking forward to another year of him being picked on during Thanksgiving dinner for the way he eats by relatives." A couple of different things, suggestions, and you have to gauge on what's right for you and what's right for the people that are at the table. But a lot of us have found that sending an email like today is a good day, and sending the email and saying, "Hey, I just wanted to bring everybody up to speed," and you don't have to be truthful when you send this letter, okay? You can say, "We've been working with, I'll use my son. We've been working with Jem on his eating issues, and our therapist has specifically asked us, he's going to have his meal with the things that he eats, and none of us are allowed to talk to him about it all. I'm not going to be prompting him to eat, and I would appreciate it if everybody else could do that. I count on you guys for so much support, and I thank you for all the ways that you've helped us. And if you could do this for me for Thanksgiving, it would really make it a happy and joyous and progressive Thanksgiving where we're making progress." That's one thing that you could do. The other thing you could do is call the person who's hosting the dinner and say, "Here's the deal. I can't do this anymore. And if like people can't lay off, I'm not going to be able to come anymore." And get a feel from them whether they want to send out the email to people and say, "Hey, we're making it unpleasant for this kid." Gauge it by your crowd. We're out of town. We're out of town. We're out of time. We're out of town. We're out of time. So feel it out, but don't just suffer in silence. Let somebody know that you're going to have to do something different. Don't forget, tomorrow, Ask Dr. Doreen, the anxiety show, and in the second hour, we have a lawyer, a special education lawyer, that's going to be answering our questions and your questions from Bonnie Yates Law Office. So we'll be back tomorrow. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.